if you're a trans kid, you get to decide what your future is. You get to decide how you identify, how much you identify with your transness, and who you get to be in the world. I don't want our rights to be contingent on the fact that we're all the same. Like, I want to be able to make different choices than you and still have the
Yes.
ability to make those choices. Like, it's our
Hmm.
differences that make us beautiful, and it's our similarities that make us beautiful too.
Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna Deshawn, here with another exclusive interview for the Queer News Podcast. If you've been listening to the podcast, as I know you have, right? You heard me tell the story about Nico Lang's new book, American Teenager: How Trans Kids Are Surviving Hate and Finding Joy in a Turbulent Era. Okay, you heard me talk about it, but now I get to talk directly to the author, Nico Lang. Welcome, Nico, to the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to be here. You are so professional, I have to say, the way you were able to just rattle the name off like right off the top of your head.
Come
Like,
on.
I'm like, you are good at this.
Thank you. I try to be good at this. I try to bring my best to the craft, which you have been known for doing and being and embodying. Family, Nico is an award-winning journalist. Yes, Nico has written for some of your favorite publications, and we could be here forever. So I'm only going to do a little. Okay, Rolling Stone, Esquire, New York Times, Time Magazine, Vox, LA Times, Out Magazine, Chile. Nico has written for absolutely everybody. And in this moment, Nico has decided to also write a book. So, did I do it all right? Do your bio some justice?
Yeah, no, that was great. It always makes me feel like a character actor, that like Melissa Leo or like Margot Martindale, who's just like taking bit parts and things to pay the bills. And then you look
That's
at their
it.
IMDb and they've got 300 credits.
That's it. That's it.
That's
That's how
me.
we do it. Yep. Yep. That's about
Character
right.
actress extraordinaire. That's me.
And you brought all of you to this novel, this book, where you followed 8 trans and non-binary folks in their lives across the country. You've been working on this
Yes.
for now 2.5 years. Chile, you almost there. October 8th is the date. How are you feeling in this moment?
Oh God, that's a loaded question. I keep
I
referring to this
know.
as like my prepartum depression era, and that it's like I am about to give birth. I've been pregnant for 2 years. It's horrible. You have this like giant baby inside you because it's if it's been growing in you for 2 years, like that's an elephant, you know? So it's like I'm about to give birth and it sucks. No one tells you that it's really hard to release a book. It's not easy, but I am so excited for people to get to share in these stories soon because it's been like I've been keeping a secret for a really long time of not getting to really like talk to people about this or I don't know go deep into the book the way that we're about to do. And it just feels so cool and special that in a couple weeks like everybody's going to get to know about this incredible experience that all of us had together writing this book. I'm just so geeked out about that. At the same time, my ankles are swollen and I'm screaming all the time. We're balancing,
Balance. Isn't life all about the balance? And I do want to
truly.
dig I do want to dig into the book. You followed 8 people who are living as trans and non-binary folks out here in a world that has been demonizing. Politicians have been using this as a weapon and using our siblings as a weapon for their own political gain. It is not easy out here for our trans and non binary siblings. And you have decided to take on this narrative and to tell their stories. You got to tell me why, Nico, you decided to go about it in this particular way.
Yeah, I wrote this book because I knew that I could do it. Like I knew that I had the access to write a book like this. And if I had that kind of network already in place to put something like this together, I felt like I just had the responsibility to do it. That this book was important and needed to be written. And if I could do it, I should do it. It really was that simple. That you look at what's happening right now in our political discourse, what's happening to trans kids across the country, and you see how dire the circumstances are. And we need as many moral interventions right now as we can get. We don't need just this book, we need 1,000 more books like it. So if I can help contribute to that in some way, I'll do it. And it really just came down to that for me. It was that simple. And I had conversations with families across the country to see if they would have an interest in it. And it just seemed like everybody really recognized the importance of this the way that I did. And they were all brave enough to do this with me. So it's like at that point, we all just have to do it. And we did. And it was scary and very hard sometimes. I think I cried with every single one of these families, but it's one of the most rewarding things I think I've ever gotten to do. And I hope they would feel the same. It just feels like one of those once in a lifetime things.
I feel that. Tell us, what cities did you travel to?
So I went to, I'm going to do this, try to do the states in order: South Dakota, Alabama, West Virginia, Texas, Illinois, Florida, and California. I always get tripped up. And my goal was to focus on like geographic diversity and that we're really hitting like all these like different areas of the country. So you're getting a wide span of just like the American experience and like these different ways of being in the world. But also like the families are so different economically in terms of their religious backgrounds, their like racial and ethnic backgrounds, just every way that they can be. They were so different from each other. And I loved that because I didn't want to just tell one kind of story. I wanted to tell like a wide expanse of kinds of stories. I wanted to show just how like incredibly diverse these communities are because it reminds people it's not just one kind of family that's affected by this issue. All kinds of families have trans kids, right? But I think only certain kinds of stories historically have gotten to be told. That it's often families with the most access and the most privilege. But some of the families in this book are really struggling. They're struggling with homelessness. They're struggling with putting like food on the table. They're struggling with the anti-trans attacks that have been like lobbied at their children. And they're really going through a tough time. But there's just so much like love and joy and affirmation in there too. So it was really important to just make room for all this stuff because you get so much more of a rich narrative. Like to me, that's what makes a book like this so special is that when you present all these different things alongside each other, when you make the narrative so dense with just life, it feels like you're really just getting to connect not to the trans experience, but to the human experience. And that felt so powerful and so cool to me.
Yeah, I like to say that storytelling gives us a window into somebody else's humanity. And it sounds like that is exactly what you're doing with this book. I love the diversity in geographic locations because that is an intersection that we don't often talk about. Chile, yes. Black, queer, woman, yes. All of those things. But also, let us not forget I'm from the South Side of Chicago because that alone says so much about who I am, where my family is from, the things I love. And I love that. Okay, so you got to tell me maybe what was your most interesting. Okay, I don't want to get you. This is probably you having a baby, child.
Yeah,
You
you're
can't
going to
pick a
get me in
kid. I'm
trouble.
gonna get you in so much trouble with even going down that road. Okay, how about this road? Give us a sneak peek, maybe, into one of the stories that I know all of them are compelling, but could you give us a sneak peek into one story in particular that you want to highlight in this moment?
Sure. You were about to make me pick my favorite child. I
I
will take
was.
that to the grave. That's never happening. If Anderson Cooper himself asked me to do that, I'd be like, sorry, Andy, I can never tell. But I will talk a little bit about the Chicago story because I feel like that's might be the most germane to some of your listeners who might also be like locals listening to the podcast. The family there, they're a Muslim Pakistani family that is surprisingly a tongue twister. They live in the Chicago suburbs and the kid there, Clint, he was so interesting to get to write about because we had this kid who didn't really identify with his transness at all. He often says that his goal in life isn't to be seen as a trans boy, it's to be a boy. And he doesn't think about being trans very often, if at all, because he insists that if he were to do that, like that's really bound up with gender dysphoria for him and he doesn't want to think about being trans because he'll think about his gender dysphoria and then he'll be dysphoric. So he, throughout his daily life, tries very diligently to never ever think about being trans. Here you've got this reporter who's suddenly, let's talk about you being trans. So I was surprised in a sense that he did that. But I think his goal in being part of the book was to tell kids that you can lead any kind of life you want. If you're a trans kid, you get to decide what your future is. You get to decide how you identify, how much you identify with your transness, and who you get to be in the world. With Clint, he doesn't really identify with his transness very much at all. Not that as a comment against the trans community or anything, it's not like a personal thing. But what he does identify very much with is his Muslimness. Like he still is like a practicing devout Muslim who does Ramadan, who like listens to prayers with his dad every day. Like they'll listen to prayers when they like drive like on the radio. He reads the Quran and he does all those things that one would expect like a devout Muslim boy to do. He just happens to be trans. And he's also never felt like that's a conflict of interest in any way. That I think there are a lot of queer religious people who maybe have some strife on the subject, who are really fighting for like space for themselves in their own religion. But I think for Clint, he doesn't really feel like he's had to do that. He's been relatively accepted by like his like local religious community, by his family. Like his grandparents initially had a little bit of a hard time, but they've come a long way. His parents, from pretty much the minute he came out, have accepted him exactly as who he is. And that story, his story, was just so complex. And it was a story I'd never really heard before. With this book, I really wanted to do that. I wanted to give readers stories that would maybe challenge their way of thinking or deepen their understanding of the trans community or just give them a story they'd never heard before. Like I felt like I was craving a story like Clint's. And if I wanted that so badly, I imagine that readers really wanted that too. So it just felt like such a pleasure and a privilege to be able to give them that.
I want this book right now. I want to know more about Clint because in that story, what I'm hearing are all of these myths and assumptions that people may make about trans folks just being debunked one story after the next, right? And especially when
Mhm.
we talk about religion and religion being wrapped up into so many of our lives. Gosh, I can't wait to dig in. Okay, I love that. I love that you had that experience, Nico. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, I'm processing.
No, you're allowed to process. While you process, why don't I tell you a little bit more about Clint's mom too? Because I think that's
Okay.
another sort of interesting wrinkle that you don't often get to hear about. Because what I loved with these chapters is that they always bristled against whatever you thought it was going to be. That my
Mm,
worst thing with a book is that if I can figure out where it's going, I immediately lose interest. I will stop reading like that page, right? Even like great books that I know everybody I love, I stopped when I figured out where it was going. I just quit 2/3 of the way in because I'm like, I know what's going to happen. So with this book, I always wanted it to keep surprising you, and I wanted their lives to keep surprising you. I wanted it to never be what you expected it would be. And with Clint, what I loved about his story is that there's often this narrative about Muslims and about Islam that like they just don't accept queer people, and if you're a queer Muslim you should leave your religion because it's just this people that like that hate you and want you to die. And there's all this stuff like bound up in that, like Orientalism, racism, just these millennia long tropes, right? But in his case, his grandparents have a harder time with the fact that his mother is like a free spirited woman, than they do with the fact that he's trans. Because his mom is just like this really cool person who's carved out a space for herself in Islam to be like a very, like, again, a free spirited woman who just lives her own path. Like, she's decided who she's married, she's decided the way that her life would go in ways that her parents didn't really want for her. They wanted to tell her what to do and for her to say, okay, thank you. But that's just not her. She was going to be the one who made the decision about who she was going to be. And they've had a really hard time with that. And she's now in her the years old, and they're still
mhm,
like fighting about this stuff. It
mhm,
doesn't end. And they've been estranged for a number of years. There's all this like strife there. And that was such a complex story to get to tell for me because it was about intergenerational trauma, but it had nothing really to do with Clint being trans. It had to do with the fact that families are going to be families. They're going to fight about stuff like pretty much no matter what. Like with my family, I love the fact that they're for the most part all liberals, so we don't really have to fight about queer stuff. They've been pretty cool. Like in the stuff that they're like not like great on, it's not because they're like bigoted. They just aren't great at language or things like that. They don't always use the right words for things, but they get it right, and they're trying, and that feels important to me. But all the stuff that we fight about has nothing to do with queerness. It's the fact that, pardon my French, we're all fucking crazy. Like my aunt and my grandmother fought for 9 months over a hamburger. They literally had a 9 month fight over a hamburger. So we will fight about anything else other than being queer. And I love that for us. And I love that for Clint's family too. It felt like it's if that's my story and that's Clint's story, then that's going to be other people's stories too. So it felt just really valuable to add that to the discourse. Obviously, I hope that they get to a point where Clint's mom is able to be embraced and accepted by her parents as like the woman that she is and the woman that she wants to be. But like in the meantime, it can be really humanizing, not only like for Clint's mom to know that there are other people out there who have those kinds of similar experiences to her or might have similar family dynamics. But if you have that kind of family dynamic too, now you know that you're not alone. There are families out there like yours. And I think that's what like we really need right now. We need a world in which we feel a little less alone. It can feel lonely.
A little less alone. And I think we're all on a search also to find our people. And I think that sometimes that can show up in so many different ways. But it sounds like what you've done with this book is be able to make these stories that people may not feel like relate to them, make it relatable. Because some stories are just human stories. And this applies to trans kids too. And I think, given the fact GLAAD's research, right, the data continues to tell us that 70% of folks say that they've never met a trans person, that they don't know a trans or non binary person. And so, any way that we can tell these stories, humanize our siblings, make it relatable so that people understand that we are all the same. In so many ways, we're going through so many of the same things and struggles. And there's other things to be concerned about in the world other than how I want to show up.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like we're the same, but we're different. And that difference is one of the ways in which we're the same. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted with this book to really focus on these things that make us like universal, right? These universal experiences that everybody goes through. Everyone has not everyone has a family. That's a broad brush. You could be like an orphan or something. You don't really have parents, so I understand there are people who might have diverse configurations of families, but there are these like universal like situations and experiences that we all go through and that we all face in our lives. But then there are things that make us unique that are true about Anna, but might not be true about anybody else on the planet. And I wanted those to sit alongside each other, where you can talk about the ways in which these kids are the same as you, but the ways in which they just get to be their own person. Because that's really what they're fighting for. They're fighting for their own personhood. They're fighting for their own voice. They're fighting to live their own particular journey in a way that maybe nobody else might choose to live it, but feels right for them. And we need to give that to them. I don't want our rights to be contingent on the fact that we're all the same. Like, I want to be able to make different choices than you and still have the
Yes.
ability to make those choices. Like, it's our
Mm-hmm.
differences that make us beautiful, and it's our similarities that make us beautiful too. So I think that in this book, like, it presents all of those things as being like like valid and valuable and interesting. And yeah, I know that there was this time where we went with the same love idea that in order to get our rights to marry people that we love, we had to pretend that our relationships were the same as everybody else. But I think I'm at a point politically where I don't want to have to be the same in order to have rights. I want to get to be me, and me deserves to have rights because I'm me. And it's the same for
Mm-hmm.
these kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is so good, Nico. This is so good. I'm so glad you decided to go on this journey, right? For the last 2.5 years, you've decided to undertake one of the hardest things, so I've heard, out here in the world of writing a book, as you put it, birthing this 2.5 year old baby, and doing the work to bring it to the people. And so we're going to do our part here. So you got to tell the good people where they can go pre order and get your book.
Sure, there are a lot of places that you can order this. You can go to bookshop.org that supports like local independent booksellers. That's a great website. If you're looking to do it in person and you live in Chicago, Women and Children First, I know, is carrying it. They're a fantastic independent feminist queer bookstore. They've been doing great work in the community for a long time. Other than that, there's if you want it, Barnes and Noble. I don't know if that's a popular opinion anymore, but I have a lot of nostalgia for Barnes and Noble. I basically grew up in the Barnes and Noble, and there are only like two of them left. So if you want to go support those two Barnes and Nobles by buying one off their website, I think that's great. If you're absolutely desperate and for some reason you can't Google any other way to get this book in the world, it is technically available on Amazon. Just don't do it because they're destroying the planet. So support somebody else. But nonetheless, you could give Jeff Bezos more money if you really wanted to. But yeah, it should be just about everywhere books are sold. That's the hope. We were an Indie Next and an Indies Introduced pick, which gets us sort of built in distribution with indie booksellers across the country. So I hope that means this book is where you are. Like, fingers crossed.
I love that. Of course it is. And then is there going to be an audio version? An audiobook version?
There is. It's a good thing you asked that. Vico Ortiz from Our Flag Means Death, who's a fantastic actor and non binary drag king, is the narrator for the audiobook. I'm sure, certainly, they've done a wonderful job. I haven't gotten to listen to it yet. I am excited to listen to it along with you. It might be like, honestly, like publication day when I finally get to hear this gosh darn audiobook. But I'm so excited. Like Vico, I've heard is an incredible narrator, and I'm sure just brings so much depth and humanity to the audiobook. So you can do that too. You can also Kindle, right? Do people still Kindle?
I don't know. I don't Kindle. I audiobook.
Uh, because Kindle is supporting this book in some way by offering it to people, I should not say whether I do or do not Kindle. Pretend that I am the biggest Kindler who has ever Kindled. I love Kindle. It's the best. Please tell people about my book, Kindle.
That part. And everybody, tell everybody about this here book. This is what we have to do. We all we got. And so when somebody part of our community is doing something like this, we go out and support because we all we got. So Nico, thank you so much for joining me on the show and for doing this work. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this is so great.
Absolutely. Family, you already know. Go pre order the book and we'll be back with more. This is Queer News Done Right.